Um, Thank you for all coming today. We sure appreciate it. This is the Small Business Phoenix Rising. Our crusade is to provide small business owners the tools, insights, and mentoring needed to get through this tough time and back to being successful and profitable. So just as a housekeeping thing, and today I guess we have just a bit of a smaller group. If you have a question, just ask it. If we get to the point where we've got 15, 20 people, it can get kind of difficult, but just unmute yourself and ask your question. Otherwise, as John speaks, I will monitor the group and make sure that everybody's muted. But if you have something to say, just go ahead and unmute yourself. So what we try to provide are tools, insights, and mentoring. And that's something that's definitely needed right now, particularly in this time of COVID-19. So let's go ahead and let's just open this up here for some discussion. Anybody have any feedback on the Paycheck Protection Program? Any successes? Any knowledge on it, other than the fact that it seems like every bit of money that the government keeps putting in, it just keeps running out? You got any new information there, John Stacy?
Well, not a whole lot of information, except Congress is supposed to be voting today for the next tranche of money. We'll see how that goes. What's another 400 or so trillion? What's a trillion amongst friends?
Yeah, right.
I think the banks are going to be a little better prepared now that they've been through it the first time. Yeah. Excuse me. They've already got all of their documents put together. They've got the process put together. I worked with Bank. They've done a pretty good job, actually a great job. I talked to a friend of mine over there yesterday, as a matter of fact. They were putting in a ton of hours. They were working pretty much 7 days a week just to get through everything. Unfortunately, they ran out of money before they ran out of applications. Right. We'll see how far this next group goes.
Yeah,
also
and that's
also talked to another friend. I think he had done something through BBV, and it was a disaster for him. And so it really is dependent upon the bank. And I think some of the smaller ones are actually do a better job of taking care of their customers.
Yeah, that's very much the case, at least from what I'm hearing. One thing's for sure, even though the banks have ran out of money, or at least the money that's allocated to them by the government, once more money comes into that fund, they'll be able to approve more applications and then start delving out more money. So the real key takeaway to all this is you got to get in there and you got to get yourself in line. If you're not in line, if you're not set up to actually get in there and get the money, you have no chance of actually getting the money, whether they approve you or not. So any questions? Anybody have any questions about that? We've got some people here that have some good experience with what they've already done. John done the whole PPP, and you got funded too, right?
Yeah, I got funded.
Okay.
Yeah, again, with Amagi, it was pretty quick. They were very responsive, and so from that perspective, I was real happy.
Yeah, well, good. All right, cool. Anybody have any questions? You can either just unmute yourself or you can go into the chat and chat there. But if we don't, we can always circle back around when we kind of get finished, or if you have a question during John's presentation, that he's actually the one that's going to be present today. So John Stacy is with AdviCoach. Just a little bit about John. I've known John for a couple of years. He's very good, very talented. In fact, he was the 2019 AdviCoach of the Year. And just before this call, he promised me that he's going to be the 2020 AdviCoach of the Year. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah, right.
I'm joking. He did not say that. I'm saying that. I'm just trying to. So just a couple of personal things on John. John actually works with me, with my company, with Pinpoint Marketing. He's given us a lot of really good insight and help to helping us see what we can do better, from a myriad of different angles. So I do really recommend him. And so without saying anything else, you're up, John.
All right. So I'm not sure about you all, but I can tell you, I'm feeling like I'm in a fog, when it comes down to it. I am tired of being cooped up. I've got cabin fever. I want to go do something. And, the challenge with that is a lot of times, unless you force yourself to do something, you really stop doing anything. So I wanted to tell you a little story of something that happened to me a couple years ago. I had a boat, and I took my boat out on the lake. It was up in Lake Conroe, and I keep it up by 1097. And I was going to just drive down from 1097 down to Route 105 and get a cup of coffee. It was a beautiful spring morning, and the water was totally calm. But if you look in the picture, there was just a little bit of fog as I started going out on the lake. And so I went out on the lake, and I got partway across the lake, and all of a sudden I got completely fogged in. I couldn't see where I was going. And at that point, I knew I was kind of in the middle of the lake, wasn't sure exactly where I was, but I did know that I had a decision to make. I could either continue to move forward, or I could turn around and go back out of the fog. I made the decision to go ahead and move forward. And, I looked at some of my instrumentation on the boat, and I'm going, I think I know where I'm going. And this half-hour trip ended up taking well over an hour. And I'm not sure if any of you, know anything about Lake Conroe, but I slowed down. It was so foggy, I became very afraid that I was going to hit something. You couldn't hear anything. You could run into a boat. You really couldn't see any lights. And at some point in time, all of a sudden, I almost ran into the shore. And I'm going, whoa. And as I looked, I could barely see the shore, but I realized I wasn't any place close to where I thought I was going to be. And, I turned around and I kind of drove along the shore for a period of time. But the point of the story is that I was afraid. I was afraid what to do. And I really almost felt like, I just need to stop and wait and see what's going to happen. The fog will lift at some point in time. And so, but I kept going, and very slowly, and all of a sudden the sun came out. I could see the sun through the fog, and all of a sudden all that fear lifted, because now I knew where I was. I knew I was going to get through the fog. Everything was going to be okay, and more importantly, I was going to be able to go get my cup of coffee. I suspect that a lot of you can relate to being in that fog and have been in that fog for the last several months as we've been going through the coronavirus. So today we're really going to be talking about what you need to do to get past this fear. What do you need to do from a planning perspective? And I hope that this becomes interactive and people ask questions and actually make some comments. But I think you all can relate to that story. I suspect that a bunch of you are actually in a fog. Before we go into that, though, I was going to rehash a little bit what we had talked about a couple weeks ago. And so if you go to the next slide, which is really about business triage, and we talked about triage, and that was really making sure that your business was set up to survive. We talked about being in this battle of survival, and it's really what did we need to do to make sure that we could maintain our cash, maintain our employees as best we could, maintain our financial health as best we could. And I know that's a challenge in a lot of cases, but we really talked about how we go about doing that. And that was, we talked all about business triage. The next thing really was all about focusing on the future, which is the next slide. And if you really plan for things, you can be a champion. And we talked about really what was your long-term strategy to reopen. And we're going to be focusing on that here in a few minutes. That included things, though, that we needed to really relook at ourselves. We need to kind of reimagine ourselves. What we are today is not what we were last month is not what we're going to be when we come out of this. I actually saw something on the news, I think last night. It was a restaurant owner, multiple restaurants on the waterways in Florida, and they, to survive, they've actually had to focus on deliveries and takeout and that kind of stuff. And what was a casual restaurant or restaurants by the ocean, they realized they're going to open that back up at some point in time, but they've actually built their own delivery group. They bought 5 or 6 different trucks to deliver, and they're really reimagining what their business is going to look like in the future. So there's a lot of people that are taking lessons today to say, okay, what can I look like, or how should I be different in the future? In that, we talk about differentiation. That's in the case that they were talking about, that's their sales model. Because the fact of the matter is, I think everybody on the phone realize that where we were a month ago or 2 months ago is going to be completely different in 6 months. So that was really all about planning for the future. So now we've kind of talked about that, I think that we would all agree that we're in a storm. Next slide. The storm is really the pandemic. And so the question is, what do we need to do to communicate to the world, to our customers, to our potential customers? What do we need to do to communicate with our customers in the community so that we can come out of the storm in a positive fashion? So today was really all about coming out of the storm. So the next slide, and again, hopefully you guys have some different ideas. And I broke this up into a number of different sections. And so we'll go through each one of these. And please ask questions or provide comments. But this is all about building a foundation of trust for the future and showing that you are an expert in your industry. And Phil, I see you there thinking. That's a good thing, because I know in your restaurant, things are going to change. You may not know what they are today, but you know they're going to change. So the first part that I thought we might want to talk about is, who should we be communicating with? And when I start thinking about my customers, or I start thinking about my clients' customers, it's who, and we're going to talk about content. We're going to talk about types of communication. We're going to be talking about media, but there's a number of different things that we're going to be talking about. But this first part is all about, who should we be communicating with? So I'm going to throw this out, and again, anybody can jump in. Current customers. Do we all keep track of our customers that we're doing business with on a regular basis today? Do we have their contact information? If we don't have their contact information, that's something that we should be trying to do. Does everybody keep track of their customers, or at this point?
I do. How about you, Lori Ash? Do you keep track of your customers?
Absolutely. 3 different ways.
Okay, and I bet you we'll be talking about that in a few minutes.
Okay.
The other, so we got current customers, and I'm thinking we also need to be talking to prior customers, and every business is different. So when you talk about current and prior, they may be the same. Bill does also. The fact of the matter is, prior customers are as important as current customers. And I've got a client that I think I'll talk about it someplace else, that does kind of what he considers back marketing, which is to all his customers that have done business with him, and he sends regular communication to them on a quarterly basis. And he was going back to customers that had been 4 years. Last year, we went back and said, you know what? Why don't we go back 2 more years and see what happens? So we sent out some marketing pieces to people that had been there, that hadn't used them for several years, and all of a sudden, I think we maybe spent $1,200 on the marketing, but I think we got about $40,000 of new jobs. So that says, hey, that with their margins, that made absolute sense to do that. But so on customers that may have used this in the past but haven't for a while, we really still need to keep track of them. And the messaging may be the same as the current customers, but messaging may be a little different. Has anybody heard of lost customers before? And what would be the difference between a prior customer and a lost customer?
Well, that's a customer that goes out into the woods, and as they go out into the woods, they get lost, right?
Yeah, there you go. Anybody else have a guess? Yeah,
serious
Phil,
guess.
why don't you unmute? Phil's trying to talk.
Okay.
You can probably unmute everybody. Yeah, Phil.
So I think in my industry, I own a restaurant. I get lost customers because of the amount of restaurants that are in the area now.
Yep.
You know, that they go try other stuff. We're on the wrong side of the freeway, or whatever you might want to call it, and just over time, you know, we don't have that marketing budget. We don't have the big freeway sign, and ultimately over time, unfortunately, we wind up losing some customers. And so trying to find a way to reach back out to them would be beneficial for us.
And so again, that's where you need the contact information. There's some things that you could do pretty inexpensively when it comes to email marketing. I know email marketing is a challenge because a lot of people are moving toward text, but email marketing still does work.
We have email. Yeah, we have about 8,000 people on our email list. And the past email I just did earlier this week, it got a little bit over 7.5% of that was open click-through rate, which is pretty good. So, but there's a lot of people that aren't getting it.
And so I'll kind of go back to the lost customers. I'm thinking from a lost customer perspective, it may be, let's take insurance, for example. You quote someone's insurance and they decide to go with someone else. They never bought from you, but you at least had the opportunity to quote with them. And most people forget about them. They didn't do business with me, but they lose the information on those people. Just because they didn't want to do business with you today doesn't mean that they won't do business with you in a year or 2 years. And if you continue to work on communicating with them the right message, you can be successful at bringing those people back. Any other thoughts on lost customers? Bill, you're on muting. Or Bill, what do you do, for your customers in the financial industry?
I've been calling them and touching base and letting them know if they have any questions. Feel free to reach out, but try to be proactive and reach out to them first and let them know, hey, we're keeping our eye on everything and we're adjusting things as needed. And if we need to do something major, we'll get in touch with you and let you know what that is and what that process looks like for you. But just making sure that they understand that, this is part of it. This is part of what we do is, we let you know, hey, these things are going to happen at some point in time, and we want to be prepared for them so that you're put in the best possible position on the other side of it so that we can take advantage of the situation rather than losing out on the situation altogether. But I agree with what you said about the lost customers and everything. Is just because somebody didn't do business with you, a few months ago or last year, you still got to reach out to them because now might be the right time for them, or they might have said, I was just thinking about that. I'm glad you called.
Anybody else? All right. So again, the first part of this was who should we be communicating with? And remember, we're talking about where we are today, and we're starting to think about what do we need to do to prepare for when we open. And when we open, maybe next month, 2 months, or 6 months, hopefully not 6 months, but we need to be communicating, keep our customers in communication on a regular basis today to let them know that, hey, we're still in business, we miss you, and we can't wait to see you again. So to me, is there anybody else that we ought to be communicating with between our customers, prior customers, lost customers, and personal contacts? Is there anybody else? Lori?
Our business partners.
Business partners, there you go.
Yeah, let me just say one thing, if I can, about personal contacts. I have a lot of personal contacts. I just know a lot of people, as most of us do over the years. And I always kind of hedge between, sending out my marketing message to people that it may not really apply to. What I've done kind of differently since COVID-19, especially with Small Business Phoenix Rising, is I've been sending all of my to all my contacts information on what we're doing. And what I find interesting, there's people that I have relationships at church, there's friends that I've known for years and years. And I'm actually really surprised at how many people were actually really interested in what we're doing with these Zoom calls, and also the value that they're seeing in this. And so, with my business where I market to businesses, if you don't own a business, right, then why in the world would I actually send information to somebody that, say, is working like oil and gas, or somebody that's working in, another industry. Well, I'll give you an example. Last night, one of my really, really good friends at church reached out to me and called me and says, Andy, I've seen a couple of the Zoom calls that you've done off of YouTube. And I have a couple of questions because I'm thinking about getting my son get him going on his own business. And so we actually had about 30-40 minute phone conversation there last night in regards to that. He's a guy, he's big time corporate. I mean, he's a good guy. He's very talented. He's got a lot of skills. He's just about a year ago, he was talking about this whole thing with his work, that if he puts in this number of years, the company's going to basically give him a 4-month sabbatical. And it's just all these awesome things that you have in the corporate world. Well, of course, those of us that have our own businesses can't even relate to that. Can't even imagine going away for 4 months and doing, living on a little beach with a little shack. And, that's what he was talking about. But what I find interesting is that I really see COVID-19 in many regards as almost kind of a reboot, a restart, in kind of expanding our contact list. Don't just assume that just because, for Phil, it's easy, right? Phil, everybody eats food, right? Mm-hmm. So you should send it to everybody. But even if you're in kind of a niche where you think maybe these people don't apply, it doesn't matter. When we come out of this and when we reopen, email everybody. Everybody should be on your email list. And if they don't like the communication, they don't like the correspondence, especially if you're on Constant Contact or MailChimp, Aweber, or any of these, or iContact, they can easily unsubscribe. It's not a big deal. But right now, everybody should know, because there could be somebody out there that either could use your services, or could be somebody says, you know what, these people over here, I know they don't know you, but I know you, and I really like what what you can do. Let me get you over to them. Does that make sense? That's all I have to say, John.
All right. Anything else before we move to the next topic? Next. All right. The next thing is we're going to really talk a little bit about messaging. This is all about content. And so, my question to you is, what should we be communicating? Remember, we're talking today about opening back up. So we may not be open, or we might be open. I think, Tony, you're there. You're open. When it comes down to it, Lori, you're open. So a lot of us are open. We're still working, but we're not necessarily working the same way that we were in the past. So it really comes down to, there's a lot of different things based upon your business that you may want to be communicating. And this would be a good thing for people to kind of shout out. As I started putting some things down, from Tony, you're in people's houses, for example. You may want to communicate the safety measures that you've taken to make sure that your staff, when they come in, are going to make sure that your customer or your customers are safe. When it comes down to it, a lot of us may be talking, we may have Zoom calls with people, so we might be doing some communication with that. Every business is a little different. So when I look at, we talked about contacts a few minutes ago, I got my contact list broken down into about 7 different segments. And so it might be medical, it might be marketing, it may be finance and accounting. So I can, when it comes down to messaging, if I want to send something out to insurance specifically or construction specifically, I can take the same basic message, massage it a little bit, but I can send something that's targeted to each one of those. Some people do that. You don't have to do that. What other things, though, that can we talk about, or what kind of things that we should be communicating? What messages should we be communicating? Any suggestions out there?
John, this is Tony. I mean, from the very beginning, we understood that this was, a situation where we needed to communicate about safety and the vehicles being clean. And we've been taking them to the car wash more frequently. We've been, the guys, the uniforms, and making sure that when we go in and do estimates, we have masks, we have gloves, we have, the foot covering as necessary. So we've been communicating that in social media tremendously. And then we do that also on an email basis that we do. We only do the email about, once or twice a month. And we've probably done it a little more frequently because we have just simply moved the email, earlier in the month. And that seems to be okay. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from our customers.
Good, because that's what people want to hear. I'll throw this up there. We're trying to, my wife and I are trying to go out and eat about the same as we used to, but it's all pickup at this point, right? My wife went to pick up something at a restaurant last Friday night, and the people came out. They had no masks. They had no protection. They made her go in to sign the credit card. And coming home, she said, "We're not eating there again." Okay. She made that decision because they're not safety conscious. Okay. And we've eaten there quite a few times. And it's just one of those things, we've been to other places where, in multiple places where they come out, they're very professional. They clearly are safety conscious. Now you can say, well, it doesn't make any difference, but the appearance of being safety conscious does make a huge difference. It's a buy or not buy decision. What other things are out there that you would communicate to your clients related to preparing what you're doing today and what you're doing to prepare for the future when you really open up?
Right. Well, John, I don't know if you know, but I'm an investment banker, so I do M&A. I help companies to buy companies. And as you might guess, that market has fallen off the cliff.
Yep.
But it doesn't change the fact that the businesses I'm representing now all have the same issue, and that's capital restraint. They're undercapitalized, and they're approaching walls. And I've been shocked at the oil field sector at just how fast the wall is actually hitting many of them. They're shutting down or going out of business. So right now, all of my time is spent providing them information on what they can do under these circumstances, how they can raise capital, what their avenues available to them are. But that's eventually to lead to building the relationship that when it does become time, I will be your guy marketing. But right now, I'm just trying to help them get out of the mess they're in. And that's where my marketing is right now.
Okay. Who else?
Well, John, I was going to say, I think it's just really important to, let all your customers know that you are going to stay in business. I think when we get out of all this, most consumers are going to wonder, hey, is this guy still in business, or is this guy in business? And that's why it's so important just to, even right now, to continue to communicate. But also too, one other thing that I think is really, really important, and this is maybe kind of from a religious perspective, because the Bible kind of teaches this, but if you're not on higher ground, you can't really help people. And at this point, I think we need to kind of position ourselves like we're on higher ground. And what I mean by that is there needs to be a sense of optimism in terms of what's going on right now. There's a lot of scared people out there, scared consumers, and it is a breath of fresh air when someone comes along and says, look, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, this is going to be a small little blip. We're not going to remember this. And we need to kind of get that going, because there's just, I'm a news junkie, but I've stopped watching the news because I'm tired of every single doctor saying, well, we're going to have a resurgence of this, or it's going to be connected, COVID-19 next fall is going to be connected with the flu and all, because it's just all nonsense. I mean, nobody knows anything. We're just pontificating on things that we just don't know what's going to happen. All I know is that most likely I'm still going to be alive, my family's going to be alive, and there's going to be a heck of a lot of other people that are going to be alive, and probably can do some good out there and help people. So I just think, coming from that higher ground, we need to do the best we can. And I know it's not really business-like, but we need to try to help lift people up to where we're at. We need to stay optimistic, because really at the end of the day, it's going to be just a small moment. It's just going to be a little blip.
We can't see
you. And with that, I see a number of people. Anna, did you want to say something?
Sorry. I didn't realize I was not. I apologize. My daughter came to ask me something.
Okay, that's fine.
Is it okay if I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, yeah. Sorry about the in and out. I was actually just at Chili's. My husband is an introvert and he's like going crazy and he had to go get something and apparently my phone died in between. But I actually saw a meme that I wish I meant to put a screenshot, and it pretty much came to the lines of, if society was if the society is more concerned about economic benefit than health benefits, than the health of the community, with this whole everyone's battling, should we open, should we not open, the industry is already sick, the community is already sick. Like, we're kind of learning who naturally wants to help their people. We're learning who wants to connect with community, who wants to connect with sociality. Because I know, at least with my business, we were trying to find that balance in the beginning. In the beginning, we were trying to just keep everything super clean, and we weren't doing a presence of doing stuff clean, and we got called out for it. And we've changed how we work because of it. And I think there's going to be a huge push after this. Everyone's wants to assume we're going to have a huge economic crash because of all this. But, with organizations like this and with talks like this, and all the different organizations, I'm seeing everyone's having a huge boom, actually, because they're being challenged. And even how, like Dr. and Mr. King was saying, us taking the high ground, us, seeing the mountain and say, okay, well, there's a mountain, but we still know how to face it. And I definitely think like relations and communication is going to completely change because of everything going on right now, which, yes, may have happened, would have happened eventually anyways, but it's that whole concept of taking challenges to push up the community, up the communication, rather than just staying in that focus that, yes, all these people are probably dying, and yes, all these people are sick. I know family and friends that have COVID, and yes, terrible and sad, but we have to find ways to find that balance of, keeping the community strong and supportive while also taking care of the people that are sick and respecting them as well.
Thank you, Kat. Does anybody have any other comments about messaging before we move to the next section? We good? All right, excellent. Next, really, this is the types of communication. Now, you see a picture of a bottle with a message in it. That would be one way to go about doing it. You'd have to throw an awful lot of bottles out there to get to a lot of people. However, so what types of things can we do to communicate? Well, I think most of us know this: emails, cards, send out. Lori, you saw that, right? You good? All right. Newsletters, there's paper and electronics, there's back marketing, and there's video. I want to mention video for a second, because just from a historical perspective, real quickly, and I'm pretty sure on the years here, but I'm pretty close. When the internet started, when we started having communicating, it was all about words. Okay, so it was all about words and content, and so the focus was that. So if you go back to the early 2000s, it was all about written content, and that continues to be important today. But when you get into someplace between 2012 and 2015, it really moved to pictures, okay? So we went from words to pictures, and if you look at where we are today, it's really moved to video. And I think it's important that we make sure that we put video as an integral part of any of the messaging that we do. Everybody learns differently. Some people hear and learn, some people see and learn, and some people watch video and learn. And if you look at the video platforms that are out there, they are growing exponentially, and that's because of the importance of video today. I wanted to throw that out there. So what other types of communication can we really put together at this point, or use in all of our messaging to that group of clients or non-clients that we talked about? Tony would like to talk, Andy.
Yeah, Tony, unmute yourself.
Okay. Can everybody unmute yourself when they want to talk? I wasn't sure if you had locked everybody out.
No, they should be able to unmute. And I'm trying There you go, Tony.
There you go, Tony.
No, I'm good, John. I'm doing three, as I normally do. I'm doing 3 or 4 things at the same time. So, I had some people asking me questions here in the office, and I was answering that. But I appreciate the attention you're paying there, John.
All right. Anybody want to make any thoughts or comments about the types of communication or the vehicles we use?
I'd like to, John, if I could, please. All right, so I am using emails, and of course, I'm doing the cards, and I'm also making phone calls. I have a list of people that I call every day, and I keep it short. I'm not talking any marketing or anything. I'm just calling up and saying, how are you doing? And expressing compassion and awareness about the situation, and then listening to what they have to say. And I might be able to come up with a solution for them, or I might be able to go back and get some answer for them. And then I also have this really cool new app that was just pushed out. So I can use it on my phone, and I can actually send little short videos to a person's telephone number. So I can create a little video with a little friendly message, and then text it to them, and then they can watch that. So that's just a few of the ways that I keep in touch.
And you made a good point, because we also, missed phone, and we also use text. Mm-hmm. The amazing thing with text, and this is probably a year and a half old, but the last data I looked at, people think that text is much more important than anything else. If people get a text, the average time to pick up a text is about 8 seconds. Okay? As a matter of fact, my kids don't talk to me by phone. They only text me. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but okay. Anything else about types of communication? Moving right ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I know one thing my office is doing is we actually are doing a pop-up. We're doing a little tent in front of our offices, and we're giving out t-shirts. I'm dressing up like the Easter Bunny this month. Next month, I'm kind of doing something based off like Memorial Day, and kind of just that like happy, like positive energy. I know I've been told about like the 80-20 rule. When you're doing like social media, 80% of the time you be the funny, goofy person, and then like 20% of the time you do like the serious sales push. And I was kind of looking back after being told that the other day, and realized that I do like more like 90% funny, goofy stuff and 10% social stuff. And it's kind of interesting how the different videos and pictures, because like we have an animal mascot in our office, and I actually get more comments and more people interested in anything with that than I do like pushing anything. So it's kind of finding that balance, but that's at least what we do.
Cool. All right, next. So, and here we go. It's really, I didn't list everything, but really when it comes down to it, lots of different ways to use media, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. There's lots of others. Websites. Andy talked about websites, SEO last week, did a really good discussion about that. Listen to the video about SEO. I think it's a good discussion from last Thursday's meeting, correct, Andy?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
No, Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay.
2 days ago.
Any other thoughts about other media to use? Good.
Yeah. Hey, John, one thing, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but what frequency should they be sent? So maybe you skip that.
Yes, I did. And you're the marketing expert.
Well,
what frequency doesn't matter, and it depends upon the vehicle as much as the business.
Well, let me just say this right out of the gate. Whatever frequency you think you should limit yourself to, you should go above that. And so in having my company for 10 years, Pinpoint Marketing, I've talked to thousands of people, whether they were customers or people interested in doing our services. Almost everybody wants to be very courteous, very polite, doesn't want to send too much stuff, doesn't want to be viewed as being a spammer and all that other stuff. But the reality is that if people don't want your messaging, they'll unsubscribe, particularly with email.
Or delete it.
Yeah. And so what I tell, people is that you really should look into it more industry specific. So for example, Phil, it's not unreasonable, Phil, for you to be sending out 2 and 3 emails a week because you have different specials, you have different things going on. That's what you see from the big boys. You see that from Outback, Red Lobster, Olive Garden. They're always sending 2 and 3. Okay. Now, George, you know, I know your industry somewhat because we've talked from time to time. Your stuff is probably more on the lines of once a week or maybe twice a month. But I wouldn't say, well, I'm only going to send, you know, 1 email message or 1 thing a month because people won't pay attention. The thing that I know, and there's a lot of studies that have been done on this, particularly because everybody thinks that social media is the end all of it, of way of marketing. In fact, you get that a lot from the millennials because that's what they've kind of grown up with and that's what they're most used to. I read a report that talked about that email pound for pound is still 3 to 4 times more effective than social media. There's so much noise out there on social media and you can't even get through someone's timeline and see everything that they post. So I say that just because a lot of times we're very quick to rule something out. I'm a big proponent of email. I'm a big proponent of direct mail, of postcards going out. I'm also a big proponent of phone calls. Now that's not very realistic, and I'll swing back here to Phil. You know, you're not going to be calling your customers more than likely. I mean, just, you know, good luck contacting 8,000 of them every month. Okay? But email, texting, even direct mail, those are all good things for you to stay in touch. The one thing I know, and I tell my Outback story when I do my big presentation, and I'll just modify it really quick, but for 20 years when I was younger, Outback was my favorite restaurant, but I would go periods where I'd eat there 2, 3, 4 times in a month, sometimes even a couple times in a week, whether I was on business, I was on a date, I met my wife, that's where we'd go, we got married, we had kids, that's where we'd take them, going to Disneyland. And then I would consistently watch how I'd eat there 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a month. But then there would be periods where I go 2, 3 months without eating there. I would forget about my favorite restaurant. Well, in 2009, they used the recession as an excuse to get everybody's contact information. They gave out a free steak dinner. They launched a wood fire grill that you could cook their steaks on. It's supposed to make them a lot better. It really didn't do anything as far as I'm concerned, as far as taste, but they got my name, phone number, email address. They got all my contact information, giving me a free steak dinner. And I thought it was a great deal for me, better deal for them, because they started emailing me 2 and 3 times a week, and very strategically emailing me at 3:30 on a Friday, in which we would have date night. And I'd say, hey, honey, I got this offer from Outback. Let's go do this. So I tracked the next couple of years with Outback Steakhouse. Still, there were times I'd eat there 5, 6 times in a month. But those periods where I wouldn't eat there for 2 or 3 months, I would just forget about it. That never happened. I would eat there at least once or twice a month for the next 2 years. And so it works. It's if you know, and I'm big into food, you know, and so if I can forget my favorite restaurant, think about the consumer. Other than for you, Phil, you can think about it in terms of being a restaurant, but think about having a product that isn't as exciting as food, because you get to my age, the only highlights of the day are breakfast, lunch, and dinner for most people. That's what we look forward to, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, consider that within your business model, consider that within your industry, and also understand that more than likely you're probably more in the lines of wanting to communicate not often enough. You know, you probably got a pretty good barometer. Go beyond that. Do a little extra more.
Point.
All right, let's go to the next slide real quick, kind of wrap things up just to do that. Next. Okay, so when it comes down to it, we've talked about a number of different things. We've talked about who to communicate to. We've talked about messaging. We've talked about types of communication. We've talked about media. But when it comes down to it, it's time to act. You need to plan now. We are going to come out of this hopefully sooner than later, but you need to have a propensity to move. If you aren't moving, you're moving back. Anyone that's sitting still today and not moving towards the future will fall behind their competition. Now's the time that we can do something to get ahead of our competition. The question is, do you want to be a leader or a follower? So just to wrap it up, my name is John Stacy. You can see my business videos on YouTube at Catalyst Strategy Consulting. We're really focused on building value in your company, exit planning, personal development. And just so you know, I'm offering people today a free Zoom session to review your company with you. Sit down, let's see if we can find some ideas to really plan for the future as we come out of the storm. So with that, if you have any questions, we'll kind of wrap it up, but appreciate all of your time.
Well, thanks, John. I'll just say that, and if there's any questions, just go ahead and interrupt me. Really do appreciate what John has said. These are all things that we should be doing, and do take John up on that free session Zoom call. As I mentioned earlier in this Zoom call, we use John in my organization, and some of the things that he's pointed out to us that probably would seem really, really obvious, you know, haven't been so obvious. The one thing I can tell you is that when we're in our businesses, working within our businesses, it's very difficult to see the forest through the trees, and he really does help businesses identify that, and business owners as well. So with that being said, thank you so much. Our next meeting is going to be April 28th. That's Tuesday. So please come. If you have any friends, family, other business owners that you know of, please refer them to this. We're really, you know, the real core to what we're trying to do is just really have everybody have the information that they need and help everybody stay optimistic. So anyway, thanks so much, and everybody have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you.